And a few days later, my mom calls me and she's like, you won't believe what just happened. And I'm like, what happened? She's like, well, your sister was here with me at the bottom of the stairs and we could hear your son babbling in your room. We thought it was a toy, so we started walking up the stairs and we got to your room and it was just very loud. It was him, but we opened the door and it stopped immediately. I have to be honest, freaked me out. Something imitating my son, I'm not really comfortable with, and I don't know why that happened or who did that.
Welcome to Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff, where we interview newsmakers, storytellers, and all-around interesting people. Sit back, relax, unless you're driving, and enjoy the show. Here's Jackson.
Hello. I am Jackson Huff. This is Not in a Huff. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, really appreciate it. This week I'm speaking with Elizabeth Welch. Now, Elizabeth is in the realm of people I've talked to a few times in the past, and that is the world of paranormal. We've talked to some psychics before. We've talked to some mediums before. We've talked to ghost hunters. We've talked to all kinds of people in that world. I like to sprinkle them in every once in a while just because I find it fascinating. You know, I don't know exactly where I stand with all of it, but I certainly enjoy speaking to people who have a passion for ghost hunting. It's certainly an entertaining thing to watch on TV. We've learned from other people that the TV side is not necessarily how it truly goes. And Elizabeth's going to talk about that a bit today. But why I wanted her on was because she comes to it with a unique perspective, and that perspective is she does the land survey research. She does research on the property of the places that her team are then investigating. So it only makes sense to say, hey, there's weird things happening here. Let's see what was happening in the past here. She talks about how she grew up in a house that was built on a former plantation. She talks about how bad things have happened in certain places and certain businesses, and then lo and behold, some bad things happen later on. So we kind of talk about that. We talk about balancing the preconceived notions of now we know the research, now we know something bad happened here. So are we just now looking for something bad to happen because we know that? Or is it now making more sense that, hey, we know what happened here, so now we can be more prepared to understand when things do happen exactly why. So I really appreciated Elizabeth's time. This is a topic that some people believe, some people don't. I don't make any kind of thoughts there. I find it interesting. So, when I'm talking to somebody about this, I always like to be as on board as possible. And Elizabeth makes it easy to be that way just because she's so passionate, she's so knowledgeable about all of it. So I think you're going to enjoy this one. Before we get to Elizabeth, please do follow along, subscribe on Apple and on Spotify. That helps the podcast a lot. Follow along on Facebook, Not Enough with Jackson Huff. Leave that 5-star review. Leave a written review on Apple. All those great things. But we'll see you after the interview to wrap things up. Here is Elizabeth Welch. Ms. Welch, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Hardest question of the whole evening. Just introduce yourself.
Hi, well, I'm Elizabeth Welch. I have been a paranormal investigator for about 7 years now, actually coming up on 8, I just realized. And I investigate with a team called Chesapeake Paranormal in the Mid-Atlantic region, mostly though Northern Virginia, Southern Maryland. My specialty is combining historical research with the paranormal, and I have a new platform called The Fortean Historian, which combines paranormal and history together.
Yeah, I love that. We're going to kind of go back to the beginning here in a second, but you mentioned that you're from Virginia. I've talked to people in this world before, and it always seems like they're either from those first 13 colony type area where there's some old history, or from the South. I wonder what's going on in Colorado and North Dakota. Is there very much paranormal going on?
I'm actually originally from South Carolina. I moved
Okay.
up to Northern Virginia because my husband's job ended up pulling us up here. But yeah, there's definitely something to it where there does seem to be more paranormal activity on the East Coast versus the West Coast. Though I don't know, you see things on the West Coast as well, like the Queen Mary, and then of course there's the Stanley Hotel. I believe that's in Colorado.
I want to now talk about, I guess, how you got your start in this world. Before we started, you talked about how apparently you grew up in a haunted house. So maybe that's what made you interested. But what made you first interested in the paranormal?
Well, it was the haunted house. I'll try to keep it brief, unless you want me to go into it a little bit more. But
You can go as long as you want, I guess, until I start Xing you. But now you're good.
okay. Well, when I was 9 years old, my parents moved us into this house. And at the time, the house was only 20 something years old. And I later confirmed no one had died in it. And this is kind of one of those situations where it's kind of a bit of a head scratcher, or there's more questions than answers because no one had died in this home. And when we moved from day one, there was activity. We were smelling tobacco smoke, like fresh tobacco smoke being blown in our face. And my parents were renovating, which, if you know anything about ghosts, anything in the ghost realm, renovation seemed to always pick up with restoration or any of that kind of stuff, like renovation, restorations. So we were renovating the house. And the very first time we had any situation, me and my sister, when we were younger, this may sound silly to your listeners, but we used to camp out in the living room on the weekends. And it wasn't really camping. You would just have like a sleeping bag and we'd be in the living room. We'd watch a movie late and then, sleep. And I was about 9 years old. She was 8 or 7. And we just moved here. It was our first time doing this and at this new house. And we started hearing knocking on the walls. We both blamed each other because that's what siblings do. And we looked over into the kitchen and all the cabinet doors were wide open. Before we could even say anything, they all slammed shut simultaneously. So that was our introduction. We both went running up the stairs, screaming to our parents, and our parents were not thrilled with us, thought we were making it up. From there on out, we pretty much had consistently small things like hearing footsteps, seeing shadows out of the corner of your eye. And I say small because compared to the other events that happened, it wasn't small at the time. We were like, oh my gosh, And then, of course, unfortunately, our parents didn't believe us while this was happening. My mom later did because slowly the activity started happening to her as well. But the next big event, I got my own room. This was in middle school. It was about a weekend. Now, I will admit I was dozing off to sleep, but something grabbed my head, like my hair. I was a side sleeper. Grabbed it, pulled it up off the pillow, and slammed it into the pillow. I was thinking my sister. To be honest, I wasn't thinking at all that it was anything paranormal. And, I got up, I yelled her name, and I turned on the lamp. And again, I'm not thinking right because I was kind of in that fogginess. I get up, I go storming out of the room, going down the hall. And it's as I'm going down the hall, I'm starting to wait a second. I get to her room and she's sound asleep. She couldn't fake sleep. And I realized, oh, wait a second. And it still hurt. It still hurt from where it pulled my head up. And I peeked in on my parents because I was like, maybe they did this. Why would they do that? But I had to check and they were asleep. I went back to my room and it was ice cold. And I'm not ashamed to say that for the rest of the time that I lived there, I had a nightlight in that room. And again, as time went on, this is about when I really started getting into the paranormal, was in middle school. So my curiosity was like, why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? I knew ghosts from like Scooby-Doo and, somewhat scary movies, but I'm like, what is going on? Why does this happen? And why are they here? And that's kind of always been the driving question, is like, why are these people still here? Or what is it? Why is it here? And so I began researching. Began buying any books, and it wasn't just ghost books. I would buy like cryptozoology books by Lauren Coleman, and I would buy books about aliens. Then, of course, when I was in high school, and I know this ages me here, but the show Ghost Hunters was brand new and was on Sci-Fi. And I remember them advertising. I was like, ooh, there's people who actually investigate this. And like, and of course I was hooked. So when I was about 16, I was in marching band, and we had an all-day band camp. It's South Carolina. It's the heat. So anyone who lives in the South, they know it's miserable. And so I got back home, and my parents were about to go to the grocery store. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to stay here. I'm going to take a shower. And they're like, cool. I'll see you in about an hour. And they took my sister with them. And so I was the only one in the house. My dad had a habit of being stingy about energy and water consumption. So he's always checking the thermostat. He hated whenever we took a shower longer than 5 minutes. He was always just on our case about that. And so I just got in the shower, just put shampoo in my hair, and all of a sudden I hear bang, bang, bang at the door. Like the room shook. Again, I'm not thinking ghost, because this is very typical of my dad. I'm like, and I remember I went, okay, I'll get out. And I was so angry. So I like finished up showering. I dried off, got dressed, and I'm ready to fight my dad. I'm 16, I was so angry because I was like, I just got in, I just told you. And I was like in the middle of saying this, like, I told you I'm just about to take a shower. And once again, it was super ice cold. And if you've ever been in a room where it's so quiet, your ears ring, that's kind of what I stepped into. And we had animals. So we had, at that point, 1 dog and 2 cats. So it wasn't a quiet household, even, when it was just me in the house. And it was dead silent. The cats were hiding, and the dog was in her crate. She would not come out of the crate. And I was like, ooh, okay, I'm going to go sit on the porch and wait for them to come home in 45 minutes. And it was pretty rare that I ever stayed home by myself at that point. The last big thing that happened, so I was a senior in high school. And again, this is going to age me to some of the viewers or listeners. And my first boyfriend and I were watching YouTube videos. YouTube was brand new. And back in the day, it took forever for YouTube to load. And so we'd wait like 5 to 10 minutes for 1 2-minute video to load. I don't know how we lived like that back then, but we did. And just watching funny videos is just like what people do now. And we were laughing. And I don't even remember what the video was, but we were laughing. And then behind us in the same kitchen, you hear, ha, 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 ha. Like that. A woman just laughed like that. And he, turned his head. He was like, what is that? Who was that? And he had known that my house was haunted, or at least I told him, but, very few people believed me outside our family. And so I felt it really like I'm not crazy, or like at least someone else experienced this, right? It was validating.
Yeah.
And he searched, and my parents were upstairs, and it wasn't them. My sister wasn't at the house for whatever reason. But yeah. And so honestly, I hate saying this, but it's kind of a little, I don't know, it's not embarrassing, but one of the reasons I went into history was because of the paranormal, to kind of back things up a little bit. So like I said, I literally would go to Barnes and Noble and just buy every book on the paranormal I could find. And if you ever get those ghost story books, they're ghost stories, right? But they always have history with them. There's always a historical story with it. And so I became really obsessed with history. And when I went off to college, I majored in history. That was actually the first time I used the historical resources, to try to investigate a property. It was my own property, or my parents' property. So I used some old map overlay that we had, GIS at the time, that the school had access to, but, not the public really. And I remember looking at old maps, and the one key thing about this property was it was built on the grounds of a former plantation. I could see on maps a building that would have been roughly in the street in front of our house. And later I ended up finding out that was quarters for the enslaved. That was roughly in front of our house. So then I was like, well, was it their spirits possibly haunting us? I wasn't sure. And again, this story actually continues because later, many years later, I had my son, and we go back home. We were living in Virginia at this point, and we go back home. My parents still live in this house, if you can believe it. They still live there. And I visit, nothing happens while we're there. We spend like 3 or 4 days at that house, and I go back up. And a few days later, my mom calls me and she's like, you won't believe what just happened. And I'm like, what happened? She's like, well, your sister was here with me at the bottom of the stairs, and we could hear your son babbling in your room. And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, it sounded like, because at that point he had been like 6 or 7 months old. So he was doing the babbling, and we could hear him babbling in your room. And we thought it was a toy. So we started walking up the stairs, and we got to your room, and it was just very loud. It was him. But we opened the door and it stopped immediately. And we checked to see if there was a toy you guys left behind, and there was nothing. And that kind of, I have to be honest, freaked me out. Something imitating my son, I'm not really comfortable with, and I don't know why that happened or who did that. But there is kind of a final historical element to this that ended up being personally connected with this story. So it's kind of an ongoing investigation, because this was only about 2 years ago. So I'm an amateur genealogist as well. In fact, I use a lot of genealogical tools when I'm searching for property history. And I was looking on my mom's side of the family tree, and a name popped out, the last name popped out. And it was the same last name that the plantation owner had. Now, it's not an uncommon name. So, I mean, I wasn't even thinking that, but something made me like, you should look at this a little bit more. And I don't know, intuition, I don't know. Could be paranormal, who knows? And I clicked on the person's name, did a little bit of research. And what's interesting is that my ancestor was a reverend who lived in North Carolina in the late 1700s, and he later moved into Kentucky. He had a brother who, instead of staying in North Carolina, actually went down to South Carolina, established that plantation, and built the house that was in our neighborhood, because the house is still there, the plantation house is. And so built that house and built up that whole plantation. So the person who in the family basically was related to us very distantly. I mean, he'd be like my great, 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 great granduncle, but still. And now I'm like, well, was this why they were coming to our house, or who was coming to our house? I still don't know. My parents will not let me investigate the house, and I don't blame them, because they don't want to stir it up. Yeah, that started my journey in the paranormal. As far as becoming an investigator, would you like me to talk about that, or?
Yeah, let's talk about kind of unpack the story that you just told. So a couple things there. One is, other than, the time that your head was picked up, which is scary. All the things you said is scary.
Yeah.
Did other things happen that were, I guess, malevolent in nature? Because I've talked to quite a few people in paranormal before, and that's kind of what they always want to convey, that, a lot of times when it comes to these spirits that they come in contact with, it's not necessarily, bad things. We always think of, ghosts as bad. The entities that are negative is a totally different world than some of the spirits that we think about. It sounds like your story is a little bit more, I guess, sinister in nature than what I've heard before. So I don't know. What do you say to that?
I wouldn't say that it was, I wouldn't go as far as like it's demonic or anything like that. I don't, but we have a theory, at least I do, or we do in our paranormal group that I'm a part of, that who you are when you die is who you are in the afterlife too. Like, I know this can be challenging for a lot of people who, have different religious backgrounds, and there's going to be different belief systems, but this is just something. And I think a lot of paranormal investigators would agree with me that people who are at least still here, right? Who they were as a person doesn't change too often. Sometimes it can, but doesn't change too often. And they tend to be that person in the afterlife. Meaning, if they're a grumpy person in, living, then they're going to be a grumpy person dead. I don't necessarily think it was evil. I do think it liked to pick on us. It might have been a bully. Because my sister definitely, and I won't share for her privacy, she's asked that I don't share her stories, but we were pretty young, right? We were not, when I was 9 years old when I moved into that house, she was about 7 or 8. And whatever was there definitely, seemed to pick on us. And when I left, my sister got more of the brunt. And my mom actually started, that's when she finally started experiencing things. But now it's, last time I talked to my mom about it, there hasn't been that much activity. The last big thing was that, and that was in 2018, I think. It was still 2018 at that point. So I don't know that like it was malevolent. And I've had people, I tell this story, especially the new additions to the story, because I've been telling this story my whole life now, just about. But the new additions to the story, a lot of people are like, well, maybe it's the enslaved trying to get revenge, or maybe it's, or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know that that's the case or anything like that. It also could be someone just trying to desperately get our attention too. There's that theory that, you see on TV shows someone getting scratched. There's a theory out there that scratches aren't always malevolent. It's just them desperately just trying to touch you as a person. And then when they do it, they accidentally scratch you, So yeah.
Yeah. And you kind of answered the other question that I'd have, because I always like to just come at it from all angles. And that is also the skeptic angle that would say, okay, yeah, you really got into this world. So of course you notice things because you are kind of waiting for them. But I mean, it sounds like even after you left, things were still happening. So it's not like, after you left miraculously for the last decade that your mom didn't have any issues. So
yeah. And also I used to call myself a skeptical believer or skeptic believer. I still try to make sure that when things are happening on an investigation, that we back up, go, okay, what could have possibly caused this? Make sure there's not other people around. If we hear a voice or something, that's happened many times, especially if we're in a downtown area at a business or something, and somebody walks in front of the street talking on their phone, then it might sound like a woman talking, It's very important. I think it's very important for all paranormal investigators to stay very as scientific as you can, because let's face it. I mean, unfortunately, the field of paranormal has not been researched or touched much by science. And it's one of those things you can't really make a laboratory for. I wish you could, but, there just doesn't seem to be that ability yet. Who knows in the future, but maybe in the future. But as best as you can to kind of try to figure out and debunk. The first thing that a good paranormal investigator should be doing is trying to debunk whatever just happened. And then after that, then figure out why it happened. What set it off, what triggered it.
Yeah, and you brought up a TV show, Ghost Hunters, that you watched as a kid. Which reminded me that I normally do ask this question of people in this world, and that is, there's so many shows out there that focus on this, and from my understanding, there's some good ones, and then there's some that are just pure entertainment that just as many scares as possible in that half hour. So my question to you is, we just mentioned skeptics. Do you feel like all these shows help or hurt the cause of I guess skeptics just thinking it's all just for show?
That is a really good question. Different people on our team would have different answers, because this is something we've talked about. I don't mind ghost shows on TV as long as it's clear that people know it's for entertainment purposes, and that's the problem. It's not necessarily geared to that. So I have to bring them up, but infamous Zach Bagans and Ghost Adventures. And I don't hate Zach Bagans. And I know there's paranormal investigators out there like, I hate him and, and what he's done. But The one positive I will say about ghost shows like Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, Dead Files, and Kindred Spirits, and all the whole bunch, is that they do bring interest and people interested into the hobby of the paranormal and paranormal investigating. The problem where things can be problematic is the approach to ghost hunting. So, one, you're always going to have skeptics no matter what. I mean, there's been skeptics since, you had I believe who was it, Arthur Conan Doyle, who would go to the psychic mediums at their tables and try to debunk them, and he mostly did. He would, when they would be knocking with their heels or something. So there's always going to be skeptics. I don't think ghost shows are really going to increase skeptics. My concern about ghost hunting shows is how they show the process of ghost hunting, because just some insider info, most shows they're presenting one night when in reality it's a whole week. They don't ever say that. They wear the same clothes, they go, and some who are genuinely, or they think they found evidence, they did not find that all in one night. Usually it's usually 3 or more nights that they're there, and then they're like, we were there for one night, and that's usually not the case. The other issue is how people investigate, and I will say Ghost Adventures has created problems with this, because let's be honest, even though if you take Ghost Adventures as entertainment purposes only, it's whatever, but a guy's screaming at the spirits and ramping them up like, scratch me, touch me, like, if you've ever seen any of those episodes, they're crazy, right? And when I was in the process of becoming a paranormal investigator, one of the things I would do is lead people through a public investigation of a haunted place that was local to here. And unfortunately, people would go in with the mindset that it was going to be like Ghost Adventures. They'd be like, come on, you're stupid, and they'd say horrible, horrible things. Like cursing at the ghost, calling them B word and all sorts of things. And we'd have to be like, no, we're shutting that down. Absolutely not. Or the other problem was they thought they were going to experience as much activity as they see on the shows. And the problem is that ghosts aren't there to perform for you. While it's entertainment on TV, when you're in an investigation or you're investigating a place, these people, they're people. Ghosts are people. They were people, and they're not there to perform for you or to put on tricks, so to say. And so people will get frustrated, living people, I should say, will get frustrated when, why isn't the cat ball turning on? Why isn't the REM pod being touched? And getting angry when there's no activity happening. And so that can frustrate some people because they feel misled by TV in some cases.
Gotcha. So I'm going to ask you a question, I guess put you on the spot. You can you can say no comment, but so first of all, I have never watched any of those shows. I have never watched any of the ghost shows. So I know nothing about any of them. So with that in mind, I'm given tickets to a lot of different things. So I went to a show by somebody who was on Ghost Hunters. I actually asked him that same question I asked you. So now I'm going to ask you this person's name. I just looked them up because I didn't remember whether they're somebody who is entertainment value or whether they were actually good. Because you said you watched Ghost Hunters, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to mess up the last name. The person's name was Dustin Perry.
Oh yeah, Dustin Perry.
So I asked him that same question I asked you. So
I don't personally know him, but
yeah.
I mean, I will say this: the Ghost Hunters crew back in 2004, when they first started, the one thing I loved about Ghost Hunters, and Dustin was part of it back then, was they did an excellent job of showing how an investigation works. They showed the setup, they showed the breakdown, they showed the review, listening to evidence, and how tedious that is. And just to warn your listeners out there thinking about getting into ghost hunting, the worst part is going through and listening to all the hours and hours of evidence. Because if you have multiple cameras, that means if you were at a 5-hour investigation, you got 3 cameras, and now you've got 15 hours of evidence that you have to go through. But anyway, I digress. I really enjoyed that they showed that process well. And those early episodes, I love the first 2 seasons at least, because there were a few episodes where they would go in someone's house and they would find nothing. And they would be like, it's not to say it's not a haunted. We just didn't find anything at this location. Now, as they became more popular, unfortunately, it does seem that they started doing some not so honest things. And I believe, and again, I don't want to I got to be careful how I say this, but I believe one of them got caught doing something during one of the Halloween lives. I can't remember exactly. It was something with a jacket, and that caused a huge scandal. Plus, the show had become, they found evidence at every place they went to. And then soon they weren't going to people's houses anymore. They were just going to the most famous places like Waverly Hills or, the Winchester House, or just all the classic famous haunted locations. And that's kind of my disappointment with Ghost Hunters. I would love to see them go back to that old traditional way they investigated. I have watched recently, I do like the live time thing where they show EVPs happening in live time that they didn't, but honestly, I kind of, that they don't react to. So now, like, instead of showing a reveal at the end, they just have, like, while they're, walking, the EVP happening. I think they actually still do a reveal, but I actually like the traditional way where you show the evidence you collect. So the audience member is experiencing the same thing that the homeowner or the business owner or the property owner is experiencing. So I really miss those early episodes of Ghost Hunters. In my dream world, there would be a show that would go back to that. But the problem is, many people find that boring because many people are watching these shows for entertainment. And that's what I believe happened to them, was that there were so many, they started growing big, but then the episodes where they didn't find anything, there was going to be negative feedback from audience members and people online. And so all of a sudden they do find something at every location. So I can't speak for Dustin. He seems like a genuinely nice guy. I've never met him, unfortunately. I'd love to meet him. And I know he was part of the early team. I don't know. I think he left around 2007 or 8. I remember around that time he left. And I know he does his own projects, but he seems like a cool guy.
Yeah. His answers were similar to yours, so he's got to at least have a little bit of, I guess, some insight on it. And I know nothing about any of these
and I
shows,
will say this, that I don't dislike anybody on the show at all. I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of pressure in my opinion, there's probably a lot of pressure from TV executives on down. And I'm not trying to say that the evidence that they present isn't genuine. I think it is. It's just, I miss the old style of going into actual people's houses, people who need help. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to your story. And
Sure.
I want to now ask you, because, I have had people from the paranormal world on before, like I already mentioned, but nobody that, goes into that historical research, nobody that does all the property research that you do. So first, what made you want to do that? Is it just because of that, that interest in history? And then tell us a little bit about what exactly that means as like I said, paranormal historical property researcher.
Yeah. So, like I said, the very first time I did that was with my own or my family's house.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly, this is going to sound weird. I majored in history, became a history teacher. And then I really wanted to get into paranormal investigating on the side for fun, honestly. And this is when I lived in South Carolina. But I ran into some problems. One, it was so hard back then to find a team compared to today. I mean, the internet was still pretty awesome at that point, but I don't know, it was just harder to find. Or for me, they were just a bit too woo, if you get my drift. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't judge anybody, but for me, it was just I don't really mesh well with this. So I couldn't really find a team when I was down in South Carolina, and we moved up to Northern Virginia. I was so excited because we lived around all these battlefields from the Civil War. And before my son was born, basically, I know this is morbid, but I guess if you're into ghosts, you're always going to be thinking morbidly. I was like, ooh, I wonder if people ghost hunt out here. And of course, when I looked up the rules, they're like, you're going to get arrested if you try to come out here at night. And I was like, okay, cool. So I did the next best thing, which was I got a recorder and I would go to battlefields during the daytime and do EVP sessions in the middle of the day, walking around on their trails. It was easy to be inconspicuous. And it also gave me valuable practice, just ghost hunting in general, knowing what questions to ask. And I was still, embedding my love of history into things. Then I found a team. They led public investigations. We had a place called Paxton Manor, and I ended up joining their team. They accepted me, and I got to learn the ropes of ghost hunting. Actually, my mentor was a guy named Ike, and he taught me, like what equipment I should have, what kind of questions should I be asking. And that was really valuable to be around during that. And I also got to lead groups of people through this mansion that was kind of this public haunting. So basically, that's like, if people go to Waverly Hills during the Halloween season, or they go to Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum or whatever, and you're in large groups and you get to investigate. And that's kind of what we did with them. And I got to learn from the people that we led and also teach people how to investigate all at the same time. And that's how I interacted with these people. And then eventually I ended up, because that team kind of started going a little bit apart, I ended up with the current team that I'm a part of now, which is Chesapeake Paranormal. And we've been together for 2 years now. And it was finally around then that I decided I wanted to approach ghost hunting differently than I had been. And I said, well, I love history. This is the reason I love ghost hunting. History and ghost hunting go together. I'm tired of going into locations completely blind or relying on the owner's narrative. Like, we think a woman in white, her lover died at sea. So she is, forever waiting, like those stories. And then you scratch the surface of the story and then you find out it's not true at all. So for myself, it actually kind of selfishly, I was like, I want to know what's actually happening at this house. And so what I started doing was I started doing the research of these homes and businesses that we were going to. So our team investigates a lot of homes and businesses. We don't go to public places. We do occasionally for fun. Like I'll be going to Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. That's why I said it recently. I'll be going there in August. But we typically investigate people who are having activity in their homes and businesses. And they want to know who, almost always the first question, they're like, who is haunting us? They're like, first of all, validate that I'm not crazy, that this is happening. And if this is happening, who is this? That's the common question. And so I started looking into property histories and the people who lived at these properties and the events. And what I do is I compile a report for the property owner. And then I have a cheat sheet that I give to our investigators. And it has the names, who died at the property or who's associated with the property that died. And we use these names and the events and the knowledge to guide our questions. And we have found that we get a lot more results that way. All of a sudden, we were starting to get a lot more EVPs. We're starting to get a lot more knocks and sounds and things moving, shadows caught. And I think that definitely helped because the spirits that are there, they're like, oh my gosh, someone knows about me. Someone knows who I am. And they're finally talking to me. And I might have the opportunity to say something, or set the story straight. So that has been really, really helpful. And it's been a game changer quite a bit.
Do most teams do this kind of work as well, or is this something kind of special about your team?
Well, you do see it, for example, Dead Files does this a little bit, where they have a medium that goes in and then they have the guy who's a cop who does the history and then they match it. And then Kindred Spirits, I think they were the first that really started putting the history research, or the Ghost of Shepherdstown. show, I think, started doing that. So you're starting to see it now a lot more in ghost shows where they do this historical research, uncovering things and using it for their investigations. Other teams, it depends. Some teams are, when I talk to them, they seem interested. And then other people actually are pretty negative about it, which is surprising, but unsurprising in a way. There are a lot of investigators who are like, no, I don't want to lead something in, or I want to go in as blind as possible so I can experience whatever's happening and they can tell me. And I get that. And I especially get it for psychic mediums. If you're a psychic medium, you don't necessarily want to know anything about the property that you're going in, because otherwise then, that kind of defeats the purpose. But I'm not a psychic medium. No one on our team is a psychic medium. I would say I'm a little sensitive, but there's 2 other members on our team who are pretty sensitive. Meaning we can kind of feel like if something's there. Like that's about all I can do is like, ooh, this kind of feels haunted, or I feel like there's something there. But I am not a psychic medium by any stretch of imagination. So for me, it's important to have that there. But it has ended up being surprisingly controversial because some investigators feel pretty strongly like, no, you shouldn't bring in outside stuff because, we're investigating. We're the ones finding out. You're doing outside stuff, bringing it in. But to me, I think we're getting a lot more evidence now. But in any case.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I could see it both ways. Like
Yeah.
when you were mentioning it earlier about how it helps you kind of get to the root of what's happening and maybe figure out things quicker if you know what's already going on. But I see the other side of saying, the same thing I was mentioning earlier. Well, if you go in expecting, Tom, who got bloody murdered in this house 50 years ago, to come out, then guess what? Tom's going to be there. So I understand both sides of things for sure. That makes a lot of sense. So question I'd have, I guess, is about what makes what you're doing when it comes to, the property research. You talked about doing kind of the land surveying as well. What makes what you're doing different than, I guess, regular property research or regular land surveying, or is it just the way you're using it? Could what the file you create be used outside of, the ghost world just to learn about the property, or is it very, very focused on, I guess, that kind of thing?
So when I do this, when I make the report, I very rarely mention hauntings in it for the client. Usually, though, they want to know what specific families live there and what events happen. That's like the 2 things they want to know. So what I do is I try to find the history of the land. I look at old land surveys going all the way back. I try to see what indigenous peoples lived there, right? As early as that, when European settlers arrived who purchased land. I'm on the East Coast, so I'm always thinking East Coast stuff. I haven't had the opportunity to do much research for West Coast or in the center part, but, these land plats, when they were divided up, who first built a home on the plat of land, I'm usually looking for that. And from there, I use a variety of different resources. My biggest number 1 resource is my local family history library. They are the most, and I recommend anyone who's wanting to know any history about their home to look into your local family history library. They're there. The resources are free for you. And they can usually do just as good of a job as the county assessor or tax deed. Sometimes people go that route and they end up having to pay a bunch of money. So there are ways to kind of get around doing that. But what I think does make me a little different is not just looking at, the names of the deeds. I do look at the genealogy. I look at the kids, how many kids they had who lived there. Did any of the children die? I look at the family history. I tried to look at newspapers.com or National Archives, looking for any events. Did a fire happen? Did a battle happen nearby? Was someone murdered there? I'm looking for certain things, and I always include those in the report. The biggest hurdle I have, though, is I can get pretty much the mid-20th century, but from there, records close because of living people. And it's very, very, very hard, depending on the state that you're in, to get past the 1950s. To circumvent that, if it's something a bit more recent, I do pay money for Died in House, which is a report that lets you know who died in your house. And actually, that's the first source or resource I give to a lot of people. Are like, I think my house is haunted and I don't know. I'm like, well, pay the $10.99 to run the Died in House report. It lets you know what crimes have been committed on the property. It lets you know who's living around your property too. Unfortunately, predators and things like that. But it also lets you know who's died on your property. And what I like about it, it's not, even if the person didn't die in your house, if they own the house but died offsite, like at a hospital, it also lets you know that too. It gives you a pretty detailed run through. The only problem with that one is it's pretty recent, like from the 50s onwards. It doesn't go too far back. So if you're looking to see what was happening on your land in the 1700s, and this is your first time doing this, I always tell people go to your local family history library, like a local library in your county that specializes in family history. They usually have land plats. They usually have those documents. They have the probate records. They have everything.
Yeah, and people listening saying, "I don't want to do all that. That sounds like a big chore." I
That's
believe
when they hire people like me.
you have that service, right? So tell us a little bit about your service. We've talked for too long. I don't
Oh,
remember
sorry.
how to say the name again.
So it's the Fortean Historian. If you go to YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, or I guess it's not Twitter, it's X now. And you type in Fortean, which is Fortean, and then historian, I should come up. I also have a blog site, but it's got a longer URL. So it's just easier to direct people to like my Facebook page, and it'll take you there eventually. And I post videos and I post articles on how to help people do property research, and also how to become a paranormal investigator. Lately, I've been getting a lot of questions from audience members on how do you get into investigating ghosts? How do you become a ghost hunter? And it's not necessarily the most intuitive thing. It's not like one day you just wake up, you're like, I'm a ghost hunter now. I'm going to go to this creepy mansion down the street and yep, I'm going to go investigate it. That's not how it works. There's a bit of a learning curve to it. And yeah. I also have a blog though that details a lot of this information. And through that blog, I do have a Fiverr service. So if anyone is curious about their property, if you contact me through there, I'd be happy to research. Though I do always give the caveat that some properties I'm always going to be able to find more than others. And it's just the history that's available. The upsetting thing, especially living in the South, we were just talking about the South earlier, especially with the Civil War, is that a lot of records got destroyed during the Civil War. And so we run into that problem a lot. All historians run into this problem a lot, where you have the lost, burnt records. And sometimes we'll find things even in like a table of contents in the books with the indexes, but the actual document's gone. So sometimes it can be a little frustrating. So just to let people whether you're investigating on your own, your property history on your own, don't be surprised if you run into gaps. It happens. Even to the best historians, it's going to happen. There's going to be gaps.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I didn't mean we've talked too long. I'm enjoying
Sorry.
our conversation. I meant that it's been too long between you teaching me how to say the word and me remembering how to say it again. No, so yeah, I want you looked up, you pulled up the Wikipedia, so I can't make you not talk about that. So I can't say the word again, but tell us where that.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
say it again. I want to be able to say it.
Fortean
What
is
is it?
named after
Fortean.
Charles Fort, Fort. He was famous during the late 1800s and early 1900s, and he wrote a bunch of articles about mysterious phenomenon. And basically anything the unexplained falls under the Fortean umbrella. So paranormal activities under the Fortean umbrella, frogs raining from the sky. He was very obsessed with things raining from the sky. mystery spots where people, it seems like time slows down, or, crop circles, all sorts of different phenomenon activity he was very, very obsessed with. And he wanted to bring more attention to these unknown phenomenon, like meteor showers that happen in only one area of the country, all sorts of different things. Basically, he had a huge following by the time he gets to the early 1900s, but unfortunately he died in 1932. But later, the people who called themselves Forteans followed him. There was later a magazine or a newspaper at the time that later became the magazine Fortean Times, which is still around today, and they still go, through anything unexplained, anything that's unexplained phenomenon. So I've always been fascinated. Now, my purview is history and ghosts, but I've always been fascinated with cryptids, aliens, all sorts of different things. Do I believe that all of these creatures and things exist? No, but I've always been really fascinated with any unknown phenomenon.
Yeah, I get that. And my overarching question here, I'm gonna make it a little bit longer, but my overarching question here is about when do people normally hire you? Is it something where there's weird things happening and I want to know what happened in my house beforehand to why this is happening? Or is it kind of a precursor that, hey, I'm buying this business or buying this house and I want to, know what I'm getting myself into? So that's part of it. But the second part of that would be, I guess, is there a correlation? Is it easy to say, based on the research I did, it's a good chance there's going to be some weird stuff happening? Or is it like, there could be a house that nothing happened in, and then they have a lot of problems, where there's a house that was terrible things happen and it's just nothing. So I wonder that correlation, whether you can, based on just research, based on just that, whether you can kind of tell whether people are going to have a problem.
Well, I'll go ahead and answer the second one first.
Sure.
I can never tell. There was one place in particular, we did get some small, tiny things, and we presented them to the homeowner, but again, it was more inconclusive. There was one property that had this amazing history, and they had this history of this freedman who lived on that property and then later moved to Massachusetts and worked for Smith and Wesson, the gun company, and later became like pretty well known in that company. And there was all this history, and there's Civil War history and some skirmish fighting. And then when we get there, we got pretty much nothing. It happens. That's not to say it wasn't haunted. It's because obviously the property owner is like, I'm experiencing activity. In this case, they were like, we've been experiencing activity. And in that case, she did reach out to us for help. And we did get a couple things, and she seemed pretty happy with that. But she was even more happy with that history profile I gave, because I said, hey, just because we showed up and nothing happened or not much happened doesn't mean that these people aren't here, and at least you have, a suspect list, basically. To answer the first question, can you remind me one more time what the first question? It was about, do they come to us or do we go to them?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, yeah, you remember better than me. I throw them out there and then I immediately forget them. The question was, do you generally have people come to you for these profiles saying, hey, I've got something happening here and I want to know why? Or is it more like, I'm buying this house and buying this business, I want to know whether things are going to be happening?
So we don't get too much of the second, where people are buying. Usually they've already bought the business. They've already bought the house. When there are people who are like, I want to know if this place is haunted before I move in. I would personally, this hasn't happened, but if someone were to ask me, I would probably tell them that they need to have a psychic medium walk through the house. The reasoning for that is usually if the sale has not gone through, they're not going to be cool with a team of paranormal investigators going in to find out if the house is haunted, bringing in equipment. And so I don't see that happening very much, but I have heard of people literally checking. I heard a story, this was back in South Carolina, where a friend of a friend basically said that when they were looking for houses, they had a person who was a self-proclaimed medium go with them on it because they did not want to end up at a haunted house. Like it was that important to them. But what usually happens is they seek us out. Now, what we do is we tend to advertise our services where we get the most traction. You're going to laugh. We go on a lot of the Real Housewives groups of different communities. Those Facebook groups where it's like the Real Housewives of so-and-so or like of this county. And we'll go on Facebook group pages. And honestly, Facebook's been our best place where we've gotten people. We've gotten a few clients through our actual website, but Facebook tends to get the most clients. And all we usually do is every 6 months or so, we just put some postings out there like, hey, we're Chesapeake Paranormal. We would be happy to investigate your home. This is completely free. We do this completely free. We're in the mid-Atlantic-ish region. We usually say how far we travel. And then usually we have people post under like, well, have you been to this cemetery or have you been to this battlefield? But what tends to happen is we get messages from people who don't want anyone to know. They're like, hey, we've been having a lot of paranormal activity. Can you guys please come out? Or I think this place or my business might be haunted. That happens a lot. A lot of business owners come to us like, hey, we have customers complaining. We have servers who are quitting. Could you guys come out and see what's going on with that?
Yeah. Two things there. One being, what advice do you give to people after you find something? Is it just simply, hey, this is what we found and peace out, good luck? Or do you give them advice on how to, mitigate their issues?
A little of both. But so we're just there to document. Like I said, none of us are psychic mediums. I don't know how to move a spirit on. I will occasionally cleanse my own house if I think like, I'm worried about taking something home with me. But I try to stray from giving too much advice because it depends on the person's spiritual beliefs and religious beliefs. We always recommend if they are uncomfortable with what we found that they reach out to whoever their religious leader is to get advice. If they don't know, we sometimes recommend them to a couple of psychic mediums that we happen to know in the area, but we don't give like, hey, make sure on a full moon that you get the sage, and we don't do that. And we don't clear anything. Our job is just to document, and we usually make sure that they are aware of that. Most of the time, what's surprising is that even with some of the scarier pieces of evidence, they seem relieved. A lot of people are relieved. They're like, you know what? Okay, this isn't, if we find evidence, they're like, something is here, right? And they're so relieved at that. And our advice beyond that, we tend to say like, hey, you need to talk to them. And this is what we always encourage people. For example, let me give you an example that I can talk about because a lot of our clients tend to be private, but let me talk about this one public one. We went to a school called the Embark School. They were having issues because a lot of the students were seeing things, they were hearing noises, and none of the teachers there, it's a private / homeschool hybrid situation. They were in a historic building and their kids were getting scared. They had kids as young as 6 all the way to 18, basically. And all the students were starting to get really nervous, scared about things that they were experiencing. And we got there, and that's how we found probably our most famous spirit named Jack. And he's on our YouTube channel. And that's one of the few investigations where we had the most talkative spirit out loud. And that's crazy. And I mean, these ghost shows, they would have killed for something like this, lack of a better word, but they would have, like, this kid was talking to us, and that's a whole sad story on itself. But as far as advice goes, we presented our findings, and some of the students were there. We did say, hey, but the community was really supportive. The parents showed up. And we're like, hey, we found a lot of evidence. We're like, this is the most evidence we've ever found. This place is wild. And so afterwards, the kids were really excited. They're like, see, we told you, like all the students, which was a cool moment. And then the adults were like, well, what do we do now? And we were like, nothing, it really needs to be done because nothing was negative there. There was nothing negative at all. And honestly, from our findings, we found that it seemed like the spirits just wanted to be acknowledged. And so after we left, they created a plan where they had kids in the morning, the first students who got there, the first faculty who got there, they'd be like, good morning, Jack. Good morning to Mr. Johnston, the other spirits that were there like that. They would literally say good morning. If something happened, the students would be like, oh, Jack, you need to stop doing that or whatever. And then it would stop. And they set their own boundaries. And we were like, and this is my advice to anyone who might be having any paranormal activity. And again, this is if it's not extremely severe or anything like that, but set boundaries, talk to them and say, look, I'm uncomfortable with you showing up. I'm uncomfortable with you making noise. I'm not trying to get rid of you, but I don't want to have to get rid of you, but please stop banging on the walls. Please stop doing these things. And believe it or not, that usually 90% of the time works wonders. Now there is that other 10%, and that's when you're going to have to go to a faith leader or a spiritualist or someone who specializes. But that's not very common that we run into that. Most of the time, once they start acknowledging, we had one client afterwards, there was a spirit of a little girl at their house, and we confirmed because we got some EVPs that suggested they did more research on her. They found out when her birthday was, and they threw her a birthday party, like at their house. And they said ever since they did little things like that, that things calmed way down at their house. And that's what usually happens once they're acknowledged. Sometimes they even move on. Like things just calm way down.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, and because I don't know much about this world at all, so in talking to people, because that's how I have learned about it. That's something kind of a common theme that I wouldn't have thought about. Two things: acknowledgement matters in both ways when it comes to these spirits, and then also just like you said, people just like to be acknowledged that, hey, I wasn't crazy. People, it's something that actually was
Yes.
there. That goes a long way. So I
Validation.
think that's interesting for sure. So in starting to wrap things up, I've got to ask you, you
Sure.
know, you talked about how you're downstairs, your husband's upstairs with your kiddo. What's he think of all this? You're
Ooh.
touring around and doing all this. Does he think, ooh, and you're coming home and cleansing the house? Is he on board?
Okay, so my husband's a non-believer. Well, he's more open now. He's more open now. And I don't want to speak on behalf of his own beliefs, but he is very much skeptic. He will try to justify anything, and I get it. If he's not there, and that's the frustrating about ghost hunting. We can put this evidence all on YouTube, but unless people are there, people are going to always assume like, oh, well, you guys faked it. Y'all have somebody whispering in a corner. You guys made a shadow go across the room or something. And that's, valid for them to feel that way because they weren't there. And again, that kind of goes back to the beginning of the conversations. Unfortunately, we can't put this in a laboratory. And that's his frustration. He wants he's very much of a scientific mind. He's like, I need this to be in a contained, thing. And there's just not that technology, for that to happen. Or at least we haven't figured that out for this phenomenon, whatever it may be, whether it's afterlife. And I know now it's very popular. People are talking about parallel universes and all sorts of stuff. And we could talk for hours, but, he is very supportive. He watches the kids when I go out. He's very supportive. I used to take him on investigations before we had kids. He misses being able to go and see historical places. And he loves historical architecture. And he was like, I miss being able to go out and seeing like the crown molding of this house from the early 1800s and the federal style, or, he misses that aspect. So he found something to enjoy. And, he loved the history too. He's a history person as well. So I like, he's very supportive, and he's had his own personal experiences and he believes those. It's just, it literally has to happen to him in a way that he can't talk himself out of it. With my children, well, I have an infant, but with my son, I'm very careful. He now knows what I do because it's just kind of too hard to hide, because people come up, see me in public or he's around. And, you know, he is very fascinated with it. He actually is very fascinated with it. And he just needs to be reassured, because he's always scared, like, is our house haunted? I'm like, no, I wouldn't. And that's what's hilarious. I go to haunted houses and businesses and places all the time, but I do not want my own home to be haunted. I know that makes me a hypocrite, and I know everyone listening is like, well, good for you, but for real, I'm like, so I do my own, I have my own beliefs and what I do to help make sure that stays this case at least. But once, we're like, this house isn't haunted, he's more like fascinated. And I see him eventually kind of going down the rabbit hole I did. But I'm kind of glad that if he's going to go down the rabbit hole, he doesn't have the negative experiences that I did. Because, knock on wood, our house is pretty safe, except for this cat here. Who won't stop screaming, but but yeah, he's interested in it. But I do keep some of the scary. I do not show him EVPs. I do not show him any evidence. I don't take him on investigations. I would never take my child on an investigation. But he's very, very curious about it.
Well, I think the cat's telling us it's time to say goodbye. So I want you to mention exactly how people are going to connect with you, whether it's your team or whether it's your individual website. Shout out all your connection points.
Okay, sure. The best for our team is Chesapeake Paranormal. So Chesapeake is CHESAPEAKE, and then paranormal. We have ChesapeakeParanormal.com, and we are on Facebook. If you if you search Chesapeake Paranormal, we will pop up. We're also on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, and we have some of our evidence up. So even if you don't live in the area, if you'd like to see some cool evidence, because we have some real cool stuff, we have evidence up on our page. If you would like to follow me personally, again, my handle's really The Fortean Historian. So that's FORTEAN, and then historian. If you search me on YouTube, Facebook, X, and Instagram, I'm pretty much in all the socials. Basically, you'll be able to find me on TikTok as well. And from there, you'll be able to find a link tree that takes you to my blog. That has all of my information, how you can contact me, my email, and it'll also tell you how to get to, if you would like to reach out to me about doing any property history.
That's great. And all of your connection points will be in the show notes. But yeah, I really, really appreciate all of the information. It's something I don't know a ton about, but you did a really, really great job kind of laying it out in layman's terms. So I appreciate that.
Oh, no problem.
That was Elizabeth Welch. Really, really amazing. Enjoyed speaking with her immensely. Like I said in the beginning, I really, really like to talk to people kind of in this world. I don't have paranormal on that much. I feel like it kind of feeds a little bit into the true crime world as well. I like to talk to people in both worlds, and soon I'm going to be talking to somebody who's kind of interweaving both of those things. Yeah, I really enjoy kind of talking to Elizabeth about kind of the history aspect of things, because of course all these things are happening because something happened in the past. So her research into that, I think, is really, really interesting. It's insightful. If you're at all interested in following along with her, you're interested and hiring her to look up things for you. She talked a little bit about the difficulties in certain areas of the country, but if you're interested in following along, all of her information will be in the show notes. If this is your first time listening to this podcast or you haven't already, go follow along, go subscribe on Apple or on Spotify. Leave a 5-star review. That helps a ton. Leave a written review on Apple. Helps even more. Follow along on Instagram, Not Enough Podcast. Really, really appreciate you being here. We'll see you next week. Take it away, Chris.
This has been Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff. Thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next time where we will interview another amazing guest who is sure to make you laugh or make you think. Or, hey, maybe even both. But until then, keep being awesome.